Dubai is one of the fastest growing cities on Earth. A city of more than 4 million people. Home to some of the tallest buildings ever constructed. One of the busiest airports on the planet. And an economy that operates 24 hours a day. But there's a problem. Everything you just saw exists in the middle of a desert. Most great cities were built around natural advantages. London grew beside a river. New York sits on a natural harbour. Singapore occupies one of the world's most strategic shipping routes. Dubai had almost none of that. No major river, almost no rainfall. Summer temperatures that can exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Yet somehow millions of people live here. Glass skyscrapers rise from the sand, fountains launch water into the air, and every day the city consumes hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh water in one of the driest regions on Earth. So the real story of Dubai isn't the Burj Khalifa. It isn't the luxury hotels, and it isn't the artificial islands. The real story is the hidden engineering system that keeps the entire city alive. Because unlike most cities, Dubai cannot rely on nature. It has to build its own.
When most people think of Dubai, they think of this: the world's tallest building, luxury hotels, artificial islands visible from space, a skyline that seems to appear out of nowhere. And, to be fair, those achievements are extraordinary. The Burj Khalifa rises more than 800 meters into the sky. Engineers reclaimed millions of cubic meters of sand to create entirely new coastlines. Every year, tens of millions of passengers pass through the city. But these aren't the systems that keep Dubai alive. They're the systems everyone can see. The important systems are almost completely invisible. Because a skyscraper doesn't need water. People do. A luxury hotel doesn't need electricity. People do. An artificial island doesn't need air conditioning. People do. And when more than 4 million people live in one of the hottest and driest environments on Earth, those needs become engineering problems. Massive engineering problems. Every morning, before the first office opens, before the first aircraft lands, before the first tourist walks through a hotel lobby, an enormous hidden network is already at work, producing water, generating power, moving food, cooling buildings, and supporting millions of people who depend on those systems without ever seeing them. The skyscrapers may be Dubai's most famous achievement, but they are not its most important one. To find that, we have to start with the problem that shaped everything else: water. The challenge facing Dubai begins with a simple question. Where does a city get its water? For most cities, the answer is surprisingly straightforward. London has the Thames, Cairo has the Nile, Paris has the Seine, New York draws from vast reservoirs connected to river systems hundreds of kilometers away. For thousands of years, human settlements have followed the same rule. Find water first, build the city second. Dubai breaks that rule completely. The city receives only a small amount of rainfall each year. There is no major river, no large natural lake, no mountain watershed feeding fresh water downstream. In fact, if you removed modern technology from the equation, a city of millions could not exist here. The environment simply doesn't provide enough fresh water. Yet every day, millions of residents take showers, restaurants prepare meals, hotels wash linens, construction sites consume water, parks are irrigated, and businesses operate as if water were unlimited. The scale is difficult to comprehend, Every single day, Dubai consumes hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh water. Not every year, every day. So where does it come from? The answer lies just beyond the skyline, out in the waters of the Arabian Gulf. Because Dubai doesn't collect most of its water, it manufactures it. And that manufacturing process has become one of the largest engineering operations in the entire region. For most cities, water arrives by gravity. Rain falls, rivers flow, reservoirs fill, and engineers simply move fresh water from one place to another. Dubai doesn't have that option. Instead, engineers turned to the only abundant source of water available, the Arabian Gulf. There's just one problem. It's salt water. And humans can't drink it. Agriculture can't use it. Most industries can't operate with it. Before that water can support a city, the salt has to be removed. This process is known as desalination, and over the past few decades, it has become one of the most important pieces of infrastructure in Dubai. Think about what that really means. Most cities inherit their water supply from nature. Dubai has to manufacture its own, every day, without interruption. Along the coastline, enormous desalination facilities pull seawater from the Gulf. The water is processed, purified, tested, and pumped into a vast distribution network serving homes, businesses, hotels, airports, and construction sites across the city. The result is staggering. Every day, these systems produce hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh water, enough to support a population larger than many entire countries. But solving one engineering problem created another, a much bigger one. Because turning seawater into drinking water requires something else, a lot of it, electricity. And suddenly, the story of water becomes the story of energy. The moment engineers chose desalination, they inherited a new challenge: energy. Because removing salt from seawater isn't like collecting rainwater from a reservoir. It requires pumps, pressure systems, treatment facilities, distribution networks, and all of it consumes electricity. Lots of electricity. But desalination is only part of the picture. The same power grid must also support millions of residents, office towers, factories, airports, shopping centres, hotels, data centres, construction sites, and one of the busiest urban economies in the Middle East. Think about what happens when you walk into a building in Dubai. The lights turn on, the elevators move, the air conditioning starts cooling, water flows from the taps. Most people never think about where that energy comes from. They just expect it to be there, every second of every day. For engineers, that's the real challenge. Not generating electricity once, generating it continuously, at a scale large enough to support an entire city that never really sleeps. And as Dubai grew from a small trading settlement into a global metropolis, its appetite for energy grew with it. More residents, more buildings, more businesses, more demand, year after year. The result is a city whose survival depends on a constant flow of power. Because if the electricity stops, the consequences go far beyond darkness. Water production slows, pumping systems are affected, transportation networks are disrupted, businesses shut down, and in the middle of a desert, cooling systems begin to fail. Which brings us to perhaps the most relentless challenge Dubai faces. Not water, not electricity, heat. And defeating it requires another hidden engineering system operating beneath the city. Heat is one of the oldest engineering problems in human history. But few modern cities fight it on the scale that Dubai does. During the summer months, temperatures can climb above 40 degrees Celsius. Under direct sunlight, exposed surfaces can become even hotter. Steel heats up, concrete absorbs energy, glass turns buildings into giant solar collectors. For most cities, heat is uncomfortable. For Dubai, it's a design constraint. Every office tower, every hotel, every shopping centre, every airport terminal must constantly fight against the environment outside. And that battle never stops. Not during the day, not during the night, not during the summer. The obvious solution is air conditioning, and Dubai uses a lot of it. But cooling millions of square meters of buildings individually creates a problem of its own. It demands enormous amounts of energy. So engineers developed something most visitors never notice, a system known as district cooling. Instead of every building producing all of its own cooling, large centralized facilities generate chilled water and distribute it through underground pipelines. Entire districts can then be cooled from a shared network. Think of it like an invisible utility. Just as cities distribute electricity through power lines or water through pipes, Dubai distributes cooling. An entire city connected to a giant hidden air conditioning system. For engineers, the benefits are significant. Greater efficiency, lower energy consumption, and the ability to cool some of the densest urban developments in the region. By this point, a pattern begins to emerge. No fresh water? Build desalination plants. Need desalination? Build power stations. Need power? Fight heat efficiently. Every challenge creates another system. Every system depends on another. But even water, electricity, and cooling are not enough to sustain a city, because none of them answer a more fundamental question. Where does everything else come from? The food, the materials, the products, the millions of items a modern city consumes every single day. And the answer leads far beyond the skyline to one of the most important logistics networks in the world. Imagine waking up tomorrow and every truck entering Dubai suddenly stopped. No food deliveries, no construction materials, no consumer goods, no replacement parts, no fuel shipments. The city wouldn't stop immediately, but the countdown would begin. Because modern cities don't simply consume resources, they consume an extraordinary amount of resources every single day. Supermarkets need inventory, restaurants need ingredients, hospitals need supplies, construction projects need materials, businesses need products, and millions of residents expect those goods to arrive exactly when they're needed. For many cities, a significant portion of those resources can come from the surrounding region, local agriculture, nearby factories, river transport, regional supply networks. Dubai faces a different reality. Large-scale agriculture is limited by the climate, fresh water is scarce, and many of the goods consumed by the city originate thousands of kilometers away. Which means Dubai depends on something just as important as water and electricity: connectivity. The city has spent decades building one of the most sophisticated logistics networks in the region, massive ports handling cargo from around the world, air freight operations moving high-value goods across continents, warehouses sorting, storing, and distributing products to businesses and consumers, road networks linking everything together. To most people, these facilities aren't particularly impressive. A warehouse isn't as photogenic as a skyscraper. A container terminal doesn't attract tourists. A logistics hub rarely appears on postcards. But these may be some of the most important facilities in the entire city. Because every meal served in a restaurant, every product placed on a store shelf, every piece of equipment delivered to a construction site depends on this invisible flow of goods. And once again, the pattern repeats itself. The water system depends on energy, the cooling system depends on energy, and the city itself depends on logistics. Remove any one of those systems, and the consequences spread everywhere. Which reveals something remarkable about modern Dubai. It isn't supported by a single engineering achievement. It's supported by dozens of them, all operating together, all dependent on one another. And that raises an important question. What happens as the city continues to grow? Up to this point, Dubai's systems appear remarkably effective. Water is produced, electricity is generated, buildings are cooled, goods are delivered, and millions of people live their daily lives without interruption. But none of these systems were designed for a static city. They were designed for a city that keeps growing. More residents, more tourists, more buildings, more demand for water, more demand for electricity, more demand for cooling, more demand for logistics. And every increase does something important. It doesn't just add load to one system, it increases pressure across all systems simultaneously. Because these networks are not independent, they are deeply connected. Water depends on energy. Energy demand rises with cooling. Cooling demand rises with heat and population density. Logistics scales with everything else. Which means growth is not linear. It is compounded. Every new layer of development requires more infrastructure underneath it, more desalination capacity, more power generation, more cooling networks, more ports and transport capacity. And unlike natural cities that grow around rivers or fertile land, Dubai is continuously extending the systems that make its existence possible in the first place. This creates a rare engineering condition. The city is not just being maintained, it is being actively rebuilt at scale while it operates. Which raises a difficult question. How long can a system like this keep expanding before the complexity itself becomes the challenge? Because at some point, it stops being about building a city and becomes about sustaining one. When you look at Dubai from above, what you see looks like a city. Skyscrapers, highways, artificial islands, a dense urban landscape rising from the desert. But that view is incomplete. Because what makes Dubai possible is not visible from the sky. It is hidden beneath it. A system that produces water where there is none. A system that generates power at massive scale. A system that cools buildings against extreme heat. And a system that connects the city to global supply chains. All working together, every hour, every day, without pause. Most cities grew from natural advantage. Dubai was built in spite of natural limitation. And so the question is no longer how the city looks. It is what it takes to keep it alive. Because in the end, Dubai is not just a city. It is a system.